Dr. Sue talks about what he calls the denial of reality, or what he says you could see as a clash of realities. And his research has shown that students of color can identify a microaggression much more easily than the dominant group can. So that whites don't identify a statement as a microaggression, whereas if you're in that category of people, you understand, or you get a sense of how insulting or how dehumanizing the comment is. One of the findings of Dr. Sue's research was that whites label students of color as being defensive when they try to confront somebody about a microaggression. Dr. Sue also talks about the invisibility of unintentional bias. And he states that we inherit the cultural bias of our society, and because implicit bias is so difficult to see due to hidden biases that are embedded in the media and embedded in our everyday lives, that people think they are inherently being good, that they're trying to do good things. They don't see the harm that they're doing. And individuals tend to think that they don't discriminate. They may think that discrimination exists, and they may say that, yes, other people do discriminate, but they never see themselves as being discriminatory. So even when there have been surveys, for instance, in police forces about discrimination and asking police officers, do you see evidence of discrimination within the police force? And the officers will say, yes, we do. Then the same questionnaires will ask, do you as an individual discriminate? And almost uniformly, all officers will say, no, I don't discriminate. So you can see discrimination in other people, but it's very difficult to see it within yourself. Dr. Sue wants to point out that there are biological and physical effects to experiencing microaggressions. He talks about the emotional effects, the cognitive effects, the behavioral effects, and he wants to point out to us that there's a catch-22 about responding to microaggressions, because they appear to be unintentional. That the person who's on the receiving end of the microaggression may experience one of 5 different responses. Sometimes they experience several of these responses, or even all 5 of those responses. And so these responses are attributional ambiguity, which is trying to figure out what was the meaning of that comment. Attributional ambiguity is pointing out that somebody isn't quite sure, was it meant to be a compliment? Was it meant to be an insult? What was the meaning of a compliment? Dr. Sue also points out that there's what's known as response indecision. The person who's receiving the microaggression isn't sure, will the perpetrator get angry and defensive if I try to have a conversation about what they just said? So there's a lot of indecision about how they should appropriately respond to the microaggression. There's also an issue about the time-limited nature of responding, because oftentimes the microaggression happens quickly. It's embedded into lots of different layers of context of communication, so it's not always as clear-cut as just a comment by itself. It's part of a general communication pattern, sort of contextual as to what the actual conversation is at the time. Dr. Sue talks about denying experiential reality, and when he uses that phrase, he's referring to the person who receives the microaggression wanting to believe that the microaggressor is not looking down on them, that this really wasn't an insult. So there's a disconnect between what they want to experience and what they want to think versus what they're actually feeling. And Dr. Sue also says there's an issue about impotency of action, and that's the belief that any acting will have a minimal impact as far as creating some good out of the situation.